Unshakable, why even excommunication couldn't silence the witnesses of the gold plates the weight of a solo act. Joseph Smith's 5-year silence for a staggering 6 years from the first visit of the angel Moroni in 1823 until 1829. Joseph Smith stood at the center of a historical whirlwind, yet he stood entirely alone. He was the only person on earth permitted to see the gold plates, a physical reality he could feel with his hands but could not show to his neighbors. To the farmers and skeptics of upstate New York, his claims were not just fantastic, they were an invitation to ridicule. The psychological toll was what Joseph described as a dreadful burden. Imagine the isolation of holding a truth that everyone around you decrees as a delusion. It was not until June 1829 that this isolation finally broke. When the Lord revealed that others would be allowed to see the plates and testify to the truth, Joseph's reaction was one of pure ecstasy of joy. He realized he would no longer be entirely alone in the world. The spite test integrity under fire. If the Book of Mormon were a product of 19th century collusion history, it seems set a trap for the conspiracy. If these men were lying, the most natural outcome of a personal falling out would be a vengeful confession. Yet, as a historian would note, precisely the opposite happened. Within 8 years of the book's publication, all 3 of the primary witnesses, Oliver Cowdery, David Whitmer, and Martin Harris, were excommunicated from the church. Their departures weren't quiet. They were fueled by disagreements or jealousies involving church leadership. These men were often at odds with Joseph Smith personally, eventually going their separate ways with no common interest to protect. Each of the 3 had ample reason and opportunity to renounce his testimony if it had been false, or to equivocate on details if any had been inaccurate. Not one of these witnesses deviated from his published testimony or said anything that cast any shadow on its truthfulness. Dallin H. Oakes. It is a rare and counterintuitive phenomenon. 3 estranged colleagues, living in social and financial disadvantage for decades, yet refusing to recant a secret that yielded them absolutely nothing but the great ridicule of their peers. No vain imagination. The reality of the physical critics often attempt to dismiss the witnesses by suggesting their experiences were merely hallucinations or dreams. However, the records left by these men are grounded in the visceral sensory reality of the 19th century, the dirt, the heavy weight of metal, and the sound of a voice. Shortly before his death, Oliver Cowdery was visited by a missionary named Jacob Gates. Oliver, a dying man with no reputation left to salvage, stood up, took a first-edition copy of the Book of Mormon, and read his own testimony. He told Gates, "I am a dying man, and what would it profit me to tell you a lie? My eyes saw, my ears heard, and my understanding was touched. It was no dream, no vain imagination of the mind, it was real." David Whitmer, standing in what he called the sunset of life, faced similar rumors of denial. His response to the Richmond Conservator was defiant, grounding his vision in an objective reality. It was no delusion. What is written is written. For these men, the experience wasn't a fleeting spiritual high. It was as tangible as the farm tools they handled daily. The wealth he walked away from Martin Harris is perhaps the most fascinating case of integrity. He was a man of high standing and significant means, yet he sacrificed both to support the coming forth of the record. He was frequently seen walking the streets with a copy of the Book of Mormon under his arm, testifying to all who would listen. Just hours before his death, an acquaintance named George Godfrey challenged Harris, asking if there was any fraud involved. Harris's response was a refusal to perjure himself for social ease. "The Book of Mormon is no fake. I know what I know. Had I been willing to have perjured myself and sworn falsely to the testimony I now bear, I could have been a rich man, but I could not have testified other than I have done." Harris's refusal to trade his testimony for wealth or reputation provides a compelling look at the nature of his conviction. To him, the truth was not a commodity. It was a settled fact of his existence. The anticlimactic testimony, line upon line, while the 3 witnesses dealt in angelic visits. Joseph F. Smith taught that for most people, certainty arrives more quietly. As a young man, he sought some marvelous thing to confirm his faith, but the Lord withheld the spectacular. Instead, Smith described a process of line upon line, precept upon precept, until the truth was settled, from the crown of my head to the soles of my feet. He taught that the Spirit speaks to the immortal part of man, bypassing the natural senses to create a knowledge that exceeds all other evidences. This internal witness is characterized by specific spiritual gifts: the gift of wisdom and understanding, the gift of prophecy and knowledge, the gift of tongues and healing, the gift of testimony. For Smith, this gradual assurance purged all doubt and fear as effectively as any archangel's trump. The heavy burden of knowing without doing. With the gift of a witness comes a formidable responsibility. Joseph F. Smith warned that a testimony is not a trophy to be hung on a wall. It is a sacred gift that is withdrawn if it is neglected or unworthily used. This provides a vital why behind the struggles of the three witnesses. For these men, knowing was a permanent state of the soul, but when their doing, their active works of righteousness and harmony with leadership, ceased, the friction became unbearable. Knowing the truth but stopping, there is, according to Smith, a path to eternal damnation. A witness must be a motivator for active righteousness. Otherwise, the possession of that knowledge only adds weight to one's failings. Conclusion: a cloud of witnesses. The historical record leaves us with what early convert William McClellan called a cloud of faithful witnesses. McClellan, who himself left the church, remained haunted by the consistency of these men. He noted that they bore the same solemn testimony in their youth as they did in their old age, even after the fires of their initial zeal had cooled. When we look at the 3 who saw the angel, the 8 who handled the plates, and the thousands who testify of the still small voice, we are left with a staggering consistency. If these men, with everything to lose and nothing to gain, refuse to recant even on their deathbeds, what does that say about the nature of the truth they claim to see? They had every reason to walk away, yet they chose the truth even when the truth cost them everything.